Shulam Aleichem, everybody. Today's daf is daf tes. We are up to the middle. We're in the middle of daf tes, actually. Daf tes Amud Aleph by Maskefla Rav Yemer Bered Rav Hillel. It's like a little past the middle of daf tes Amud Aleph. So here we're talking about a moiser Pesach, which means somebody shechts a carbon Pesach shaloi bezmane, after Pesach, and he's shechting it shaloi lishma, shaloi bezmane shaloi lishma. The halacha is it takes on the din of a shlamim. Now, where do we learn it from? Because we said, the pasuk says, V'im min atzoin. Yeah? If from the tzoin, karbonoi lezevach shlamim Hashem. So the tzoin must be carbon pesach. Why? Because the shlamim can be brought from bakar as well. Why is the Torah telling us tzoin? Right? The only carbon that needs to be brought from tzoin, which is kvasim and izim, sheep or a goat, is a carbon pesach. So we're talking about a carbon pesach. Karbona, if you bring from tzoin, which is the carbon pesach after Pesach, then and you shecht it, it should be a shlamim. So the Gemara asks 1 second. Tzoin doesn't have to be carbon pesach, right? It could be an asham. An asham has to be brought also dafka from tzoin. So who's to tell you that it's talking about carbon pesach? Maskav l'Rabbi Yoel dervilo, my do meiser pesach ksiv, dilma meiser asham ksiv. Amarav makro. It means that you can be makriv it from all kinds of tzayin, which is kvasim and izim. But asham can only be brought from kvasim, from sheep. So v'imin atzayin sounds like dover hashove b'chol hatzayin. Okay, well, you can bring it from all types of tzayin. That's only a Pesach. All of a sudden, you flip. Everywhere you're telling me min means exclusive, min, from, which means it's coming to be mamayit. And here you tell me it's l'rabbis. It would make more sense to say it's an asham because min atzoin sounds like from tzoin, not all tzoin. Right? And here all of a sudden you're saying min atzoin means davar shava b'chol atzoin. No, here also it's true. Min is coming to be moitzi, it's coming to exclude. You can't bring it from a keva. Right? You can't bring a Karban Pesach from a cave, it has to be a Zachar. And also you can't bring Karban Pesach from a behemoth that's past a year old, that's in its second year. Okay. Maskef la Rav Chana Bagdasa. Rav Chana Bagdasa, Rav Chana from Baghdad. Yeah. Very, very important city in Bavel. So he's from Bagdasa. He asks the following. You're trying to tell me that the Iminat Tzoin over here is talking about Meiser Pesach, yeah? From a Dechsivim Kesev. Im Eiz, once the Torah in that parsha has to specify Kesev and Eiz, Michlal, the Labo Meiser Pesach Ksiv. We're not dealing with Meiser Pesach, because if we're dealing with Meiser Pesach, I already know that a Pesach can only be brought from Kvasim and Izim. I don't need the Torah to specify in that parsha of the Iminat Tzoin, the Kesev and the Eiz. So, from the fact that the Torah does have to specify Kesev and Eiz, must be we're talking about a Shlamim, not a Pesach. So the Gemara says no. Really, we're talking about a Karban Pesach. You'll ask me why the Torah has to specify Kesev and Eiz. We need it for what the Brisa teaches us. We learn important halachas from it. Kesev l'Rabbis as a Pesach la'Aliyah. Even though we know it's a Karban Pesach, the Iminat Tzoin can only be brought from Kvasim and Izim. But this second Kesev and the Parsha of Shlomim over there, it's coming to teach us. We're already talking about a Pesach. Why do you have to tell me Kesev? I know Pesach can only be brought from Kvasim. L'Rab is a Pesach la'al. You have to be makriv, the zonov, the tail. You know, it's a fat tail. It has geshmaka, fat to it, so you have to put it onto the mizbeach together with the emurim. Kshoimer and Kesev l'Rabbas Pesach she'ibra shnosa. Also, it's marba. A Pesach that was Ibra Shnasai, that's not Roy L'Karban Pesach once it's past a year old. And also, Shlomim Aboim Machmas Pesach. Any Shlomim that you bring together with the Karban Pesach, right, a Karban Chagiga, L'chol Mitzvah Shlomim, that all these, they have the regular mitzvahs of Shlomim, which means a Pesach she'ibra Shnasai. Yeah, so Kesev is marba the Pesach la'alya. Im Kesev, the word Im Kesev is marba also a Pesach she'ibr shnasa, and the shlomim that are ba machmas Pesach, that you need all the mitzvah shlomim when you makriv them. She'ita'anu smicha nesachem et nufas chazei v'shoik, sha'omer im eiz, hefsek inyan limit al eiz she'ena tuna aliyah. Im eiz is telling you that it doesn't need an aliyah. And eiz doesn't need the aliyah on the mizbeach. You don't have to be makter it only by a keves. So the Gemara asks, slow down. The halacha that of a carbon pesach that was over shnasai, that you have to be makriv with the Torah shlomim, is really learned from im kesev over there by shlomim v'meratzayin v'ma'acha nafka medavud shmul nafka. You're learning from over there, learning from over here. Damavud shmul v'meratzayin kabban l'zevach shlomim. Yeah, you learn from this pasuk of Avuad Shmuel that Moiser Pesach should go to Shlomim. Yeah, we learned about it earlier. Really, you got to learn Pesach Shibur Shnasa from Im Kesev. You learn from Avuad Shmuel. You also have it from Rav Nachman. Yeah, so what does it mean, Tzoynu Bakar? Why Bakar? We're talking about Carbon Pesach. That the Carbon Pesach sometimes has to be brought, but Toiras, a carbon that can also be brought from Bakar, which is Shlomim. So I have three sources for the same halacha. So L'tlasa Kroy Ksiv. It says the Gemara, I have three psukim to teach you that a Pesach that was of Rosh Hashanah, that was past a year old, you can't be makriv as a carbon Pesach anymore. You have to be makriv with Torah Shlamim. Why don't we need three psukim? Says the Gemara, Chad le'ibra zmanoi ve'ibra shnasoi. One teaches us for a case of ibra zmanoi ve'ibra shnasoi. Right, it's not anymore the 14th after Chatzos. It's over zmanoi of shchitas carbon Pesach plus over shnasoi. It's also too old. One is if it's over zmanoi, but it's still age appropriate to be brought on the mizbeach as a carbon pesach, but it's not anymore the time. It's already past erev pesach, past the arbos or ben rabbayim, so you can't bring it anymore. And another pasuk is to tell you that when you have a carbon pesach and it wasn't over zmanoi, it wasn't over shnasoi, but you shechted it l'shem shlamim, the problem was shaloi lishma. Yeah, still, when it comes to Erev Pesach, it has to be brought as a shlamim. Right? Lo ivra lo izman, it doesn't mean that it's Erev Pesach right now. It means it's before Pesach. So it wasn't over this man, but it's still not Erev Pesach itself when you can be makriv. Otherwise, it would be possible if you're makriv b'Torah Shlamim. Okay, so these are the three scenarios. If it just would have given me one source, Havamina, I would have learned only the least chiddush. Only when it's over age, it's past the first year. Also, it's over zmanoi. So there, the itchem pesach lagamri, you can never bring it as a carbon pesach anymore. No way, no how. Then it's chal a shem shlomim on it. Aval ibr zmanoi v'lo shnasoi. But let's say it's only over zmanoi, right? But not shnasoi. The chazla pesach sheni. Technically, you can bring it as a pesach sheni because it's still within the year. Yeah, pesach rishon passed, but you could still bring a pesach sheni. Eimoloi, maybe it's not nekar the shem pesach from it, so therefore you can't be makar b'Torah shlamim because achmon hani tarti. If you just would have said these two, I would have said mishem de itchulu mamasayu. Yeah, maybe these two because it was nitcha in some way, shape, or form. It's still right? The only avera was that it was nishchat sheloi lishma, was nishchat l'shem shlamim, but it's still over zmanoi. It's still over shnasoi. So eimoloi, maybe it should still be brought as a carbon pesach. No, it should be puzzle from a carbon pesach lagamri, and it shouldn't take on Torah shlamim because it wasn't naka the shem pesach. So therefore I need all three sources. Okay, so the Gemara Omar Rav Mishmei de Mavoig. Wow, there's a chacham. His name is Mavoig, and he says as follows: Chatas sheshchoto l'shem chatas nachshain ksheira. A chatas that you shech l'shem chatas nachshain is kosher. Why? The Omakra, Zois Toiras Achatos. Toira Achas Lechol HaChatois. What's a Chatas Nachshen? Chatas Nachshen is Nachshen Bar Minoda brought by the Nesiim, by the Chanukas HaMishkan. He was the first one to be Makriv a Chatos. So this guy shechts a Chatos L'shem Chatas Nachshen. Yeah? What's Chatas Nachshen? Chatas Nachshen, really, Nachshen didn't need a kapara. He brought a carbon Chatas without really, it wasn't for the sake of being mechaper for a certain Aveira. It was more like a doiron, it was more like a gift to Hashem. So you would think that maybe it's a Chatas Shaloi Lashma, because even though he's makriv at Lashem Chatas, Chatas Nachshen is different. Chatas Nachshen has a din of an oiler, really, so maybe it's different. So there's a drasha that no, it doesn't matter whether you're shechted l'shem achatos that's like a doiron or not. It doesn't matter. All types of chatos is nechshav min echad and it's nechshav l'shem chatos. Yosef Rova kamen lo shmaitza esav Rav Shashai Rova. Rova was repeating the shmaitza this halacha from Mavig, and Rav Shashai asked Rova the following question: Reb Shimon Amar kol menachas shenikmatzu sheloi l'shma ksherin. All menachas they did kmitza sheloi l'shma. They're all kosher. Yeah, they did shaloi l'shma. It's kosher. V'olu l'bailam l'shem chayva, and even the bailam who's mechuyev to bring the mincha is yoitza with that mincha. Why? If you she'ena menachas daimel l'zvachim. By Zvachim, the first mission we learned was that it's loyal l'bailam l'shem chayva, but menachas it is. Why? Because menachas are different. Shehakoymitz machvas l'shem archeshes. Somebody does kmitz on a machvas, l'shem archeshes, maseh mechichen ala l'shem machvas. Machvas has different consistency, right? It's a pan. So if somebody he thinks to himself, I'm going to do the kmitz of a machvas l'shem archeshes, yeah, but the maisa of the kmitza from the machvas is mechiach that it's a machvas. So you can't go keneged that maisa. That already is enough to kasher it. What about chareva, drier mincha? Yeah, there's no shem in it. Minchas choyte, minchas soite. L'shem blula, yeah, mincha that has blula that's mixed in oil. So again, it's not going to passel it. You're still going to be yoitze because the mais is mechiach. That is l'shem chareva. Avul bezvachim ain't okay. Yeah, bezvachim you don't have mais of mechichen because shchita achas lekulen, chabol achas lekulen, zik achas lekulen. They all look the same. So the Gemara says taima. So what do you see from here from Reb Shimon? Says time the reason why it's all l'bailam l'shem chayva by menacha is because the maseh mechichen. Ha'ei maseh mechichen loy. Amai, why not? Lema zois toiras amincha toira achas l'chol menacha is dash in the same pasuk. It's only because maseh mechichen that it's kosher. If it's shaloi l'shma, it's all l'bailam l'shem chayva by menacha. But if it's not mechichen, it would be pasul. Well, what about the pasuk of zois toiras amincha? Eliyit merach yitmer amar Rav Mishmeid Mavig chatas sheshchot al menashi skaper banachshain ksheira because in kapara lamesim. Really, Mavig never said it with regard to shinoi kodesh. Shinoi kodesh be'etzem if a guy shechts his chatas l'shem chatas nachshen could very well be its possible. Why? Because chatas nachshen is more like an oila. It comes ladoirin. It's not mechaper on anything. So there, it's certainly possible. Well, when did Mavik say it's kosher? He said it when it's Shinoi Bailam, when the Kohen had in mind to shecht it for Nachshen instead of the Bailam. Here it's kosher. Why? Because in Kapara Lamesim. There's no Kapara for Nachshen. Nachshen, first of all, doesn't need a Kapara, and he's dead. There's no Kapara for Mesim, and therefore it's not really a Shinoi Bailam. Gemara says, V'leima meiz ba'alma. So if Mavik is trying to teach me this halacha of in Kapara Lamesim, it's not considered Shinoi Bailam in such a case, why is he talking about Nachshen? Talk about a regular Meis. Why confuse us with a name? Nachshain. Hakamashmal and time at the mace. The reason is because Hitaka died, because Nachshain died. Hadachai dumya de Nachshain. But if let's say this fellow Nachshain would have been alive, right? Or somebody like Nachshain would still be alive today, which means somebody who needs to bring a chatos like Nachshain. This chatos is la'oila, not lachatos, which is mechaper. Yeah? And he's alive, then it's psula. That would be puzzle. Umayniu, chatas nazir, chatas mitzayra. So the reason why I chap on Nachshan is because we're trying to tell you the reason it's okay is because Nachshan is dead. But if Nachshan would be alive, Nachshon to be alive, or somebody like Nachshon who brought a kapara like Nachshon, or chatas like Nachshon, which is not l'shem kapara, yeah, then mamashal, chatas nazir, chatas mitzaira, they don't really come for a kapara per se. This is part of the process, their tahara, that they have to bring a chatas and a oilan and a osham. They have to bring these karbonas. So that chatas is not really l'shem kapara, and so that's similar to chatas nachshain. Chatas nachshain is it's also not l'shem kapara. So the only reason why nachshain, if you shech l'shem nachshain, it's okay because he's dead. But chai dumya the nachshain would taka be puzzle. So the Gemara says, Hani oilas nenu. 1 second. If it's not mechaper and anything, then they should be mamish like an oila. And we said in Daf Zayin, we said earlier that hashoichet chatas l'shem mi shechayiv lahavi oila, that would be kosher, because the whole Shinoi Bailam of Chatas is learned from the Chipper Olav. We darshan Olav Dumya, Chavera Dumya Didei. Olav Veloy Chavera, Chavera Dumya Didei. That means only if you shecht it l'shem Bailam Acherim, l'shem somebody else who's mechuyev Chatas like you. But if you shecht l'shem somebody else mechuyev in Oila, it's still kosher. So these guys, Chai Dumya Denachshan, who bring a Chatas Nazar Chatas Mitzayra, it's not mechaper anything. It's like an Oila. So why should it be possible? Eliyit Merach Yitmer Meravish made the Movek Chatas Sheshachta Al Mi Shemechuyev Chatas Kanachshain Ksheira Chatas Nachshain Oilahi. You're right. It means taka. You're right. It's Ksheira. What he said was anyone who's Mechuyev Chatas like Nachshain, which is essentially an Oila, because Chatas Nazar Chatas Mitzayra and Chatas Nachshain, none of them are brought for a kapara. It's taka kosher. Ikad Amar Meravish made the Movek Chatas Shachta Chatas Nachshain Psula. Chatas nachshen oilahi, because chatas nachshen is an oila, so it's possible because of shinoi kodesh. V'leim chatas nazir chatas mitzayro. So if really that's the point is because it's an oila. So why chapping chatas nachshen and not chatas nazir chatas mitzayro, which is from somebody, could be brought from somebody today? Why go back in history? Says the Gemara, no, ikr chatas nakat. He's chapping on the shoyrish of all chatois, which is the first chatas that was ever brought onto the Mizbeach was Chatas Nachshen. That's why we refer to it as Chatas Nachshen. But really, there's no machlokes between the Ikad Amar and the previous Lashon. It's just, Ikad Amar is talking about Shinei Kodesh, right? Shinei Kodesh is puzzle, right? If a person has in mind to Shech the Chatas L'Shem Oila, that would puzzle the Chatas, Shinei Kodesh. The previous Lashon had a Girsa in Mavig. Mavig was talking about Shinei Bailam. So in Shinoi Bailam, right, if somebody shechts the chatas, l'shem Bailam, somebody else who's mechuyev, a chatas naz, a chatas mitzvah, l'kan oila, in Shinoi Bailam it would work. It would be kosher. Different droshes. Okay. Zug the Gemara, Rav, chatas chelev sheshchata l'shem chatas dam, l'shem chatas avedes kechavim, ksheira. Interesting. So there are different types of chatas. So in Shinoi Kodesh, let's say I bring a chatas because I ate chaylev b'shoigeg. You bring a chatas because you ate dam b'shoigeg. Or somebody brings a chatas, they did a v'dezara b'shoigeg. They all bring chatas. Yeah? So it's ksheira if the kohen shechts, my chatas l'shem chaylev, l'shem dam, or vice versa, it's kosher. What about l'shem chatas naz, l'shem chatas mitzayde, psula, hani oilas nenu. Okay, that's mamish the psak. That those chatos are taka different. They have a din oila, and it would be considered as if it was shechted a chatas shech l'shem oila. Boirav a chatas chil shech l'shem chatas dum the tumas migdash v'kedashav mahu. What about tumas migdash v'kedashav? What's the halacha? Mi aminon karas kamoisa still a chatas because it has karas b'mezid. They're both chatas chelev is karas b'mezid, and also tumas migdash v'kedashav is karas b'mezid. Oidilma in kavua kamoisa, since it's different in the halachas of oila v'yared. Tumas Mikdash Kedashav depends on your financial status. So therefore you can't, it's a different kind of chatas altogether. That would be considered shaloi lishma, that it's puzzle. Shaloi lishem chatas, not the same type of chatas. Rav Acha B'rei Rav Mas Dekula Lepsula, he said it's puzzle, my time of a shachat oisa, l'chatas l'shem oisa chatas, which means that even if you change it around to chatas, avedus kechavim, chatas dam, chatas, none of the other chatos would work. It has to be l'shem oisa chatas. So what's the boy of Rava? If you mamash have such a clear-cut drasha, so what's Rava's shaila? Amar Leis, he said, no, Rava's shaila was with regard to something else. Shinoi kodesh, even a different type of chatas would also be possible. Anam b'shina bailam masninin la, v'achem masninin la. Amar Rava chatas chelu sheshachta al misha mechuyev chatas dam, chatz averis kechavim, it's psula, right? It's talking about shinoi bailam. So in shinoi bailam, the world of shinoi bailam, the halachas can change. It's different than shinoi kodesh. So chatas chelu that you shechted al misha mechuyev chatas dam or chatz averis kechavim, yeah, that would be considered that you shechted it l'shem somebody else's mechuyev chatas, that would passel it. Al mishem mechuyev chatas no zachatz metzayra ksheira, because that we consider like an oila. U'boyin lanachi boy rava. Yeah, boyin lanachi boy rava chatas chaylev sheshchot al mishem mechuyev chatas. Thomas Rick the Dasha Mao miu minin kares kamois lo menkva kamois teku. Which means once you're dealing in the world of shinoi bailim, so in shinoi bailim the halach is that it's only possible if you shecht it l'shem somebody else's mechuyev chatas like you. So what does it mean like you? How much like you does it have to be? Like you, which means that the Aveira, B'mezid, would have been kares, so that is enough like you to consider it the same chatas, same kind of chatas, and it's still kosher, right? I mean, it's still puzzle, because it's similar enough. The more similar it is, the more puzzle it is. The more different it is, the more kosher it is. That's the way it's by Shinoi Bailam. So by Tumas Mikra Kadoshav, the question is, it has a similarity, it has a different aspect to it. So how do we view it? Teku. That's a teku. Okay, we'll stop over here.